Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 3 of the RetroPGF podcast. This is a special episode because we have Jesse with us once again. Jesse was our inaugural guest on episode number 1, but because of some technical issues that I had, we ended up not getting a recording of that episode. So I decided to invite Jesse back where we can run back the conversation and hopefully dive into a few more topics, maybe get a little deeper into some things, but just so that we can have this on the record for people who weren't able to tune in the first time. So if you're new here, this is a podcast where we talk about everything retro PGF and share the stories of those who have already been successful at earning retro PGF in previous rounds. And Jesse actually is now working for the foundation. But before that, he was an independent contributor to the Optimism ecosystem, where he ran a Twitter Spaces, a podcast, YouTube channel, and was also actively involved in governance. So one reason that I think Jesse's story is so great, which I talked about on the first episode, is that he really came in completely independently to the Optimism ecosystem and really built his reputation and built his brand all on his own. And because of that, he became eligible for a pretty healthy chunk of retro PGF in the I think it was 20,000 something tokens. Jesse, is that right? 20 something. Um,
Yep, 27 and some change, something like that.
which obviously is like a huge boost for any person that's creating educational content. And he did that just through his own work and dedication. And so I think it's a story that other people can model their own path after as they want to contribute to the optimism ecosystem. So welcome, Jesse. I'm glad to have you here once again. And yeah, how's everything going?
It's going well. That was a beautiful introduction, by the way. And also, I collected that retro PGF and then delegated it to you. So you are my optimism delegate because I work at the foundation. I can't vote my own OP, so I have delegated to one of the most trusted people in the ecosystem, Michael. So I appreciate everything that you do as well.
Stop, Jesse. Stop. You're honestly too nice. I'm extremely honored to have your delegation, and hopefully will help make the decisions that push optimism forward. But this is a podcast about you, not about me. So stop being nice. Um, so maybe we can just kind of start out with a few of the questions just for people who didn't get a chance to listen to the first one. Do you want to maybe give a quick background on yourself and some of the work you did? I guess mainly focused on kind of how you kind of first learned about optimism and some of the work that you did coming into the optimism ecosystem.
For sure. So I actually originally found out about like crypto because of my friend texting me in 2021, like, hey, what do you think about Ethereum? So I started to kind of dive in, and I realized that in what 2 years since I've heard about smart contracts, and then kind of didn't look any further into it. Ethereum had built a totally parallel system from the current one, right? So I was like, there's something here. I jumped in. I used some applications, very easy to use. And so once I kind of got involved in like the general Ethereum ecosystem, fees were obviously very high whenever I jumped in, and so like I was waiting for like a scaling solution, right? And so I was checking out a bunch of L2s, transacting on them, and then I actually found the Optimism community, an NFT community, an early NFT community. Is actually the first NFT community. Started kind of vibing in the Discord, and then from there, like what really puts me in, well, you come in for like the NFTs and to vibe with the community, but then also you're talking about retroactive public goods and values, and so that's what really hooked me. And so one of the people in the Discord that ended up being the co of my the podcast slash Twitter Spaces that we did the Web3 experience. He actually DM'd me in the Discord server. Was like, hey, we should have like a community call or do like a Twitter Spaces each week. And I was like, yeah, definitely. And that kind of first OptiPunks community call eventually morphed into a Twitter Spaces that we did weekly, kind of talking about optimism and interviewing early stage projects within optimism. And then literally everything else that I've done in the optimism ecosystem as a community member stemmed from just talking to community in that open Twitter Spaces in that podcast. And so from there, there were, as we were doing the Twitter Spaces each week, there were a lot of questions about the Optimism Quest. And so then I went and I created a YouTube channel. Did an Optimism Quest YouTube tutorial series specifically for beginners because it's like all these DeFi protocols that you could get get an NFT for, completing some tasks on these protocols. It was like really complex and hard to understand. So I made those YouTube videos walking them step by step on how you complete the quest, how you use the protocol, the risks involved. Um, Specifically for beginners and showing them exactly how to do that. That's kind of how I started the YouTube channel. And then from there, I believe it was season two of governance. We were in the Twitter spaces talking about how we felt the NFT and gaming ecosystem just didn't have enough representation in optimism governance. And so then I reached out to the host here, Michael, and a couple people, and we formed an NFT and gaming committee that ran for Optimism Governance Season 2, and so that's kind of how I got involved in governance as well. And then eventually, I caught the attention of my current boss and head of all Optimism community, V, from involved in governance, and she kind of nerd sniped me. And that's how I got started working for Optimism.
Awesome. And so what is your um like official role right now at Optimism and what are you working on?
Yes, so I am a Optimism Foundation contributor and lead of the ambassador program. So I love this anytime I get to show the ambassador program because I actually started out in the ambassador program as I was making all of that content. As a community member, I joined the ambassador program. So what I do for the lead of the ambassador program is you can think of the ambassador program as the decentralized marketing arm of the Optimism Collective. And so there are a bunch of really highly skilled content creators who you are a part of as well. Shout out to you for being an ambassador. So they're a group of very highly skilled content creators, and they also have a diverse range of skills. Like some are very good at graphics, some are good at long form written content, others are very good YouTube educational creators. But this kind of centralized marketing arm of the collective called the Ambassadors is the program that I lead. And so it's to kind of get it to a point where it can kind of run itself and also fund itself through different governance mechanisms like mission proposals, which we have a mission proposal out now actually for RetroPGF content bounties. So kind of makes sense. But eventually, the idea is for the ambassador program to truly decentralize and kind of run itself, and then I'll just sink back into the ambassador program as a community member and a contributor.
So it sounds like eventually the plan is, I mean, so you started out, I mean, with a Web2 job, but then also earning independently through RetroPGF. Right now, you're employed at the foundation, but eventually it sounds like the foundation, as everything decentralizes, RetroPGF is going to be the mechanism by which you'll get paid again, once again, coming for full circle, right? Is that right?
That I love how you put that together. Yes, that is 100% right. The total idea of the foundation is for it to stand long enough until the down of govern itself, technically and also socially, and the ambassadors is kind of the social piece of that.
I think that's one thing that's just so cool about Retro PGF is that pretty much, I don't know, maybe 90% of crypto companies that start say eventually that they want to decentralize, but the actual mechanisms for maintaining funding have really just been these traditional DAOs with votes on grants for funding, grants for funding like different initiatives. But Optimism has both, right? What do you think some of the advantages of Retro PGF are over a traditional uh, like proposal then grant program?
So that's a good question. So I guess like kind of describing retro PGF first to answer that question, it's like I would consider it ru- a ruthlessly efficient way to use your capital as well as incentivizing businesses to only build things that benefit the public good. So it's like the first piece of that to me being ruthlessly efficient with capital, retroactive public goods funding is exactly that. It's retroactive. And so people are rewarded for the things that they build, the things that they create retroactively. And that principle is kind of different from the current one where we are upfront funding people, right, through and other things to build something, thinking that it's going to have some value in the future. Whereas retroactive public goods funding, right, rewards you on the basis of the impact that you have already had to the collective. So you're really using your capital efficiently in that you are rewarding those who already built something versus, say, a grant of providing some upfront funding to build or create this thing that you think will have value. And I think that's the that's the very important distinction and advantage that retroactive public goods funding has over something like a grant funding or a traditional funding mechanism, where a traditional funding mechanism is guessing at what will be valuable and funding that upfront. Retroactive public goods funding already kind of knows what's been valuable, what's been a public good, and you can retroactively reward what has already been impactful and of value with equal amount of profit.
That's that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And it's cool. One thing that the OP stack, the OP collective has is both of these things, right? For the cold start issue, there are grants, but then as these retro PGF rounds become more and more um, frequent and reliable, people can actually start building, planning for retro PGF in the future. I'm curious. I mean, as the head of the ambassador program, which is putting out a lot of retro PGF content, and as someone who actually uh, received retro PGF, do you think that um, starting this cycle, have you seen a lot of projects that are building specifically for retro PGF round three? And do you think, compared to round two, do you think there are more projects that are kind of anticipating that funding? I know it's a really open-ended question, but I'm curious on your perspective on what you've seen.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I think that is 100% right on the nose. And I'll kind of give you anecdotes of kind of why I think that. For like content creators, like the ambassador program, educational content creators. I think that when RetroPGF 2 was announced, right, and part of RetroPGF 2 defined as a public good was the educational piece. That was an absolute fucking game changer for content creators because usually as a content creator, it takes a very long time to monetize, right? And so you have to build up your following and go the traditional route of ads or whatever it may be. And so whenever RetroPGF 2 was announced, and content creators, educational content creators, could get funded through that mechanism, you no longer had to build up a large following and figure out some way to monetize because the retroactive public goods funding has already monetized as long as you're creating impact within the Optimism system, making educational content, increasing user adoption, bringing new users in to the Optimism ecosystem, and increasing usage of Optimism in general. So I think that was like an absolute game changer, and like from every content creator that I've talked to, PGF, every single one of them has changed their plans or their kind of roadmap for the content creation or whatever they may be doing, like their podcasts, Twitter Spaces, whatever it may be, to fit the definition of getting funded through RetroPGF in the future. So I think there's, at least from an education standpoint, there's a lot of that going on, and from a couple builders that I talked to as well, and heard from, there's definitely a lot of builders that are kind of changing RetroPGF funding, and I think that's the good thing. That's exactly what we want, because the definition of retroactive public goods funding is that are of good to the public. It's kind of
Jesse, it sounds like your mic is cutting out a little bit there. I'm not sure if it's my fault or if it's on your
that
side. How can you hear
that
me
might be
okay?
me. I think I just dropped a bar. How can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, but I can hear most of what you're saying, just not everything.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds better. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm curious actually.
Okay, how's this?
Starting from, oh, yeah, go ahead and start saying something so that I can,
Can
you can hear
everybody
me,
else
right?
hear me? Uh, Maybe a thumbs up if you can.
Or a thumbs down if you can't. Well, I said let's go ahead and push forward because I could hear you at the end there, and we got a thumbs up, a few thumbs up. Hopefully this isn't on my side. Um, Thanks, guys. Um, okay, so one question I was curious about
Okay, can you hear
was,
me now? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, perfect.
yeah, yeah.
Michael, I cannot hear
Um,
you. Can everybody else hear Michael?
let me see. How about now? I took myself off Wi-Fi, so I think that might have been the issue. Jesse, can you hear me?
Perfect now. I'm gonna blame that on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's when in doubt, just blame it on X. I mean, I know they've had spaces um have good in the past, so that's a good idea. Um, all right, yeah, sounds a lot better. I'm curious. So you were talking about kind of finding ways to monetize. When you had your podcast and your YouTube channel, did you monetize in any way? And did you ever get any offers from potential sponsors or anything like that to monetize?
I love that question. So absolutely not. We were so early and niche that there was there was really no chance at all for us to monetize. And like we literally just did the podcast and like I did the YouTube channel just because that's what I love doing. And I was already bought into Optimism's value, so it's like wanting to bring other people into the ecosystem. So no, there was no monetization offers. There was no at least in the short to intermediate term, way for us to monetize. So that's why I was like so super ecstatic while we were doing that podcast, and I was just part of the community when RetroPGF 2 was announced that education would be funded, and I was like, I told my co-host, I was like, this is perfect. We we literally don't have a way to monetize, and now Optimism, because we're already doing educational content on Optimism through YouTube and our podcast slash Twitter Spaces. Like this is our route. Like this is what we do. And if I hadn't joined the foundation, I would still definitely be doing those Twitter Spaces and YouTube, and I would only be focusing 100% on optimism content, honestly, just because it's like that's the only ecosystem that really rewards education, educational contributions, and has promised to do it over the long run with multiple rounds of retroactive public goods funding.
Sorry, I lost my unmute button for a second. But yeah, that's great. It's like you don't even have to think about finding. I feel like the monetization side, it's this whole second step for content creators, right? Especially in industries that are more niche, like with optimism. I know some of my optimism content took the most amount of work, and like your your Twitter Spaces, the Web3 experience, pretty much everyone that mattered in the optimism ecosystem knew who you were, right? But that doesn't necessarily translate into a massive number of eyeballs. If you had been covering topics that were a little bit less niche, like Luna or these or other, Ponzi type protocols or anything like that, you might have gotten a lot more eyeballs, which theoretically would mean more money from any kind of sponsors or advertisers or anything like that. But you could just skip all of that and make the content that's actually good for the world, knowing that Retro PGF was there to come in and fund you.
Yes, for sure. And also, I love that because, like, the content creators that were already doing Optimism content just for free because they loved Optimism, once RetroPGF 2 was announced, like, they already had an Optimism following. And so they already have a head start on everybody else who is just kind of trying to come in and farm the RetroPGF and make educational content for future rounds of RetroPGF, which is awesome. And, like, that's exactly the point of RetroPGF and what we want. But it's also nice that the current people who are in the Optimism ecosystem and making content had already a huge head start.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so maybe shifting gears just a little bit. I'm curious, talking about the actual process, the actual application process for Retro PGF. Once you found out that yes, you would be able to be nominated, um, can you tell us about what you actually included in your application? And maybe what was your pitch for the content that you were making to badge holders on why you should be a recipient of Retro PGF?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good question as well because it's like the answer. Whenever I give it, hopefully it gives other people an idea of kind of how to apply and like what content or what kind of to include in your application, so that you can demonstrate your value to badge holders. So within my application, since I did the Twitter podcast, right, I put that, but main kind of focus was the YouTube channel because of the Quest tutorial series that I had. And so I put that in the application along specifically with my YouTube analytics for how many views, the like rate, stuff like that. And my pitch to kind of badge holders for like the value that it creates, the nature of the content that I was creating was a tutorial series on Quest. It was very specific. Went through each protocol and like step by step showed you how to use that protocol. Amount you can kind of make an argument for the amount of views that it got. Translate into more active users on Optimism. So more people using Optimism, increased usage, which is what you're really kind of for. So like the reason why I adapted my application to be okay, I have YouTube content here. These are Quest tutorials. It has this many views. Most likely, the people watching these very specific Quest tutorials are probably also in those protocols as well. And so it's like you kind of make the logical leap to those videos having an actual impact on usage on Optimism and bringing new users in as well, because it was geared to kind of new users just approaching these protocols and being able to use them.
So it sounds like the um, trying to put real numbers on the application sounds like it's something that you tried to do, and also I've kind of heard from Jonas and from other people at the foundation that for the next round that trying to get real data and like tangible data is something that they're really trying to push for round three, right?
Yes, 100%. So, like an example, right, is end user experience and adoption is one of the categories for round three. So, work that provided impact to end users in the Optimism Collective or help bring new end users into the collective. So, whatever you're producing or creating, think of, or even before you create it, right? Think about that criteria and how best you could create content, and then use the data from that content to make a logical leap of bringing in new users into Optimism to transact and using or increasing kind of usage of Optimism as well in general. And so any data that you can provide to support that, I think, makes a huge impact on badge holders as well. And also, badge holders, the citizens, they're probably going to have a lot of projects to review for RetroPGF 3 because it is a big round of 30 million OP. And so the more concise and data related you can make your application for RetroPGF round 3, I think all the better.
Awesome. Yeah. We're definitely going to see, you know, a whole new, it'll be interesting to see how round three goes compared to round two, because like we were talking about the iteration that we saw in governance, RetroPGF also is trying to iterate. And round one was, very niche. It was before even there was any OP token, right? I think it was before the OP token. Um, and so round two was kind of like the first big open round. And then now round three is going to be this the first major iteration coming after round two. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I know with your work with the ambassador program, you've been encouraging ambassadors to really create retro PGF content to get this flywheel going before round three. I'm curious, what are some of the most important pieces of information that you want your ambassadors, or not your ambassadors because they're part of the community, right? But kind of your ambassadors, the Optimism ambassadors, to convey about retro PGF, especially when they're looking at old projects and things like that.
Yeah, I'd say the simple answer is the focus on the impact that they've already had on the collective. So it's like whenever you're making content, right, for RetroPGF recipients, and like one of the reasons why um, I like this content creation for RetroPGF recipients of round two is like the idea is like you tell the story of the winners of RetroPGF round two, like how much OP they got, how much they've impacted the collective, like why they got that amount of OP. You know, impact equals profit, and we want to reward people who build and create public goods on Optimism. But telling those winner stories, right, I feel like inspires others to come into the ecosystem. Number one, maybe these people reading this content have never even heard of retroactive public goods funding or Optimism, but telling that inspiring story of the people who have actually successfully gotten retro PGF for the public goods that they have provided, hopefully will inspire others to come into the Optimism ecosystem and build and create those public goods. And so for the kind of ambassador program and everybody else out there looking to make retro PGF content, I would definitely say to just tell the winners' stories. Why they got retro PGF, how much OP they got, and what impact they had on the collective to inspire others to come in.
Awesome. Um, okay, so kind of stepping back from RetroPGF and looking at Optimism as a whole, I know we've been getting a lot of news about Optimism. The base is going to launch to the public on August 9th, I think. I mean, they already have their bridge up. Zora is happening. WorldCoin just launched. I know in governance, I'm not sure if you saw, but the law of chains was introduced, which is kind of this framework for um, how the super chain, some of the stakeholders and the rights that those stakeholders will have in the super chain. It's finally an actual document that they're looking for feedback on right now to actually develop this constitution for the super chain. Um, so all that said, and we have Retro PGF coming up. The ambassador program you just launched the new initiative, which is well underway now. With Thrivecoin, all these cool things are happening. What are you most excited about for Optimism?
Oh man, that is so many things and such a tough question to answer. I think in the long run, like so, this is just a truthful. Like I came into the Optimism ecosystem, and like I fell in love with Optimism because of retroactive public goods funding, where it provides this new economic mechanism that is different from the current mechanism, where you're able to be ruthlessly efficient with your capital, and then you have a massive pool of capital as well that only rewards businesses, people, creating and building things that benefit the public in general. So it's like the thing that I'm most excited about and I'm most hopeful for Optimism is this idea of retroactive public goods funding, because if we can get this flywheel really going, at some point I think that a company is going to start to use retroactive public goods funding as an exit strategy, right? And so companies now, right, they're usually like VC funded upfront. What retroactive public goods funding does is it's like, okay, I know that Optimism is running these retroactive public goods rounds, and there is a bunch of OP that will be rewarded every so often through these rounds. And so I think that people will start to create businesses, projects, just around trying to get retro PGF. And like, I think that is a huge thing because the economic mechanism itself, right, retroactive public goods funding, only benefits businesses, projects, people who build and create things that are a public good. Whereas, like right now, in the kind of corporate sense, you have shareholders and all you are trying to do is maximize shareholder value, and it says nothing about whether it benefits the public good or not. So it's like the current economic mechanism is just make as much money as possible, or make as much money as possible, and don't worry about building for the public good, whether that be a public good or a public bad. Like this new economic mechanism, retroactive public goods funding, only rewards people for building public goods, and that's what I'm definitely most excited about. Is getting that kind of flywheel going, and having businesses projects specifically centered around building and creating public goods so they can get rewarded through this new economic mechanism that changes the game.
That's awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for coming on again. And I'm pretty sure this won't be the last time we have a conversation on a podcast either, but maybe we can give you a break so you can get back to work on the OP ambassador stuff. Do you want to maybe do a quick shout out to or a quick plug for really anything you'd like, whether that's the ambassador program or RetroPGF or anything?
Yes, so if there are any good content creators out there, maybe you're not, maybe you're listening to this and you don't even know what retroactive public goods funding is, but you're a really good creator. Right now, the Ambassador Program has a Retro PGF bounty program that you get rewarded in OP for creating content centered around Retro PGF recipients, right? So telling the winners' stories, whether it be through Twitter, a Twitter thread, Twitter Spaces, or even a YouTube video. So even something like this that you're doing right now, interviewing a Retro PGF2 recipient like me on a Twitter Space, would qualify to be rewarded through this Retro PGF content bounty program. So I would encourage everybody to go check it out. It's on ThriveCoin, and
Yeah,
I'll
guys,
drop
if you
a link to it in this thread as well.
awesome. Yeah. If you haven't checked it out, the rewards, you guys, are actually pretty good. So even if you weren't thinking about making content, maybe if you see um, kind of some of the bounties for this content, obviously it has to pass um, a test and be judged by someone that it's legitimate and that there was like good effort put behind it. But for doing like a research on the retro PGF recipient, the reward I'm just looking right now is 100 OP. um, and 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 that's not the only one. So definitely go check it out, guys. Once again, thank you, Jesse, for being on the podcast and having this conversation with me. I'm so excited to see what you do in Optimism going forward. I know we're all just getting started, and so yeah, thank you so much, and stay optimistic. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And look forward to your next week's episode with another Retro PGF recipient. I'll be tuning in.
All right, yeah. Thanks, Jesse. All right.